Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was grateful for an opportunity to just show a little courtesy to a dear friend, Senator Isaacson, in that previous incident you're referring. And I will, at the risk of not being as gracious as I should be, just share that when Senator Isaacson and I met with the South African minister, that meeting was to hear their concerns about the impact of the steel tariffs on a very important alliance. Chairman Corker and I recently were in Sweden and had a chance to hear from them about their concerns about the steel tariffs. I am encouraged by the announcement that's just come out an hour ago about the meeting with EU leadership, but remain very concerned that some of our closest allies around the world are getting the wrong message. In a dinner last night with the Canadian ambassador, a large bipartisan group of us were there to try and reassure them. I do think that we should be corralling our allies and partners in confronting China's aggressive, prolonged, and inappropriate trade actions and avoiding some of the needless harm we've caused to close alliances. The point of the South African meeting was that they are preparing countervailing tariffs that might well shut down our access to their market. But I'm not really here to talk about chickens, as much as I do love talking about chickens with my friend Senator Isaacson. Mr. Secretary, I just want to say first, thank you for this very long hearing. I want to confirm a number of senators have asked you pointed questions about progress with North Korea, with Russia, issues around Syria and Iran, and you've said not in this setting. Will you return soon to brief us in a classified setting, because there's a number of important and pressing things we really haven't been able to address today. Will you come back and give us that classified brief?
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course.
And a number of senators on both sides have recognized that you've got an important role in a very difficult time. I want to up front just say I was pleased to hear about the Crimea Declaration. I think it's important for the administration to be forceful and clear about our position with regards to Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea. I remember my whole childhood, there was a little box in every American map that said we refuse to recognize the illegal annexation of the Baltic states by the Soviet Union in 1940. And for decades, folks thought that was just aspirational and would never happen. Today, the Baltic states are free. They are NATO allies. And the chairman and I recently visited Latvia as well and heard from them about their determination to remain free and to take strong steps against Russia's interference. Finland and Latvia, the Baltic states, other allies of ours in that region are prepared to invest more in their own defense and to strengthen their defenses against Russian interference in their upcoming elections. There's elections in Latvia and Moldova and Sweden that are happening soon. What best practices are you seeing among our European allies? What tools do you think the State Department can and should be using? And how should we be doing, as you put it, everything we can to push back on likely election interference by Russia to our vital allies as well as to our upcoming midterm elections?
Yeah, it's a good question. We, the United States government, my previous organization in the intelligence world, did a great deal of work with our European partners. We did it with the German election, the French election, try to help identify threats and vectors, good, solid intelligence sharing. I think that's an underpinning so that these governments can understand the threats. Sometimes America is better positioned to see them and observe them than some of these other countries that are smaller with fewer resources. And then I think it's also important, and we've begun to do this, that countries begin to share the actions that they observe. That is, not only the precursors or the indications, but what actually took place, to download so that we can begin to understand how to push back. I think it was Senator Paul who said earlier, there's lots of variations on the theme, right? There are overt efforts. There are, call them...
Covert efforts.
Covert efforts. There's influence operations. There are lots of methods by which adversaries, not just Russia, can attempt to undermine elections and democracies. We have obligation to the Europeans, and it benefits America as well, if we try and help them ensure that their democracies are protected as well.
And I do think we would benefit from hearing more and more regularly and more clearly what we are doing with our close allies to convey that we get what is happening to them and that we are concerned about what's happening to us. Frankly, I want diplomacy to succeed. I prefer an environment of diplomacy to one of a perception of imminent conflict with either North Korea or Russia. And you've been very forceful, even aggressive today in advancing the administration's position. As the chairman said earlier, a lot of the tension here, I think, comes from the gaps between your of forcefulness and clarity and what I perceive and many perceive to be the president's lack of forcefulness and clarity. In your written statement, you say that President Trump has stated, quote, "I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place." And then you go on to say he has a complete and proper understanding of what happened. My concern, if I could just directly, is that our president has never made a clear and comprehensive speech outlining the threat posed by Russia, our strategy to respond to it, and criticizing directly President Putin for directing the attack on our election in 2016. Just a few days ago, now I guess more than a week ago, Robert Mueller delivered indictments against 12 Russian military intelligence officers, GRU officers, calls them out by name, gives enormous detail of how Russia attacked our 2016 election. And one of the ways in which our president then undermines the clarity and credibility of that action by our Department of Justice is by calling the Mueller investigation a rigged witch hunt, or by standing next to President Putin in Helsinki and suggesting he's uncertain whether our intelligence account of what happened in 2016 is the more credible or the Russian one. Could you please clarify for me if there are clear indicators that Russia continues to interfere in our election planning up to this November, would you advise the president to rescind an invitation to Vladimir Putin to come and meet in the White House? Do you think it is unwise to extend the credibility and the prestige of a White House meeting without being clear about Putin's threat to our upcoming elections? Senator Paul said, and I agree with him, we should meet with our adversaries. But as President Reagan did, we need to be clear-eyed about who they are and call them out for being adversaries before sitting down with them. Can you commit to being clear with the president and helping us understand whether or not the president clearly understands the attack on our election?
So I've tried to do that earlier today, Senator Coons. I think the president is very clear about that. It is, I find it surprising that statements that are made, especially a statement like a statement for the record, I mean, you should all know the White House cleared that secret, right? These are White House. I uttered the words. These are President Trump's statements in that sense as well, right? These are statements from the United States government, of which President Trump is very clearly in charge, and somehow there's this effort to suggest that they're not that. The statements that I've made today are fully consistent with you, unless I misspoke somewhere along the way, which is possible after a couple hours. These are indeed the administration, President Trump's policies that we're implementing.
My core point, Mr. Secretary, was that while your statements have been clear, our president's statements have confused our allies, encouraged our adversaries, and have failed to be comparably clear. And I'm concerned that an invitation to President Putin to the White House without clarity about his threats to our election, his threats to our allies, puts at risk clarity. I welcome the Crimea Declaration today. I think that is an important step forward. But I urge you, if President Putin attacks our next election, advise President Trump to withdraw any invitation to President Putin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Portman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for